When it comes to the champagnes that you'll see on the shelves, they're usually NV, which means non-vintage. In Champagne, they benefit from being able to blend multiple years, multiple vintages into a wine to make the house style. So it's consistent, delicious. And the Grand Marque, the big brands like Piper Heidsieck, Bollinger, Moet, you know what you're going to get every single vintage because over the years they've formulated the house style. Usually in Champagne, the top wines will be single vineyards or vintage champagnes, which means the wine comes from grapes from one single exceptional harvest. And since Champagne is a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter, not every year they can make a great vintage champagne like this one here. We have the rare Millésime 2013. This champagne, which is the luxury brand off of Piper Heidsieck, has only been made like 12 times in the last 5 decades. Vintage champagnes are generally more expensive. They spend a longer time on the lees and they're supposed to age better. If some of these terms are super confusing to you, check out my video I did a few weeks ago that explains the entire process of how champagne's made. It also highlights how you can read the different things you'll see in a champagne bottle. But if you clicked on this video, you're pretty geeky. Here today, I have 6 champagnes. 3 different sets of one producer where we have the house champagne, the champagne you're going to see commonly on the shelf, versus the vintage champagne, which is much more expensive. We're going to blind taste the difference and see, hey, is it really worth it? Generally, I find that I like buying the house champagnes because they're blended from multiple vintages. You get a lot of complexity and also you're going to save a lot of money. Vintage champagnes are supposed to age better, and while I love aged champagne, not everybody has a cellar wants to spend that kind of money to keep a wine in the cellar for many years or even decades before they drink it. For instance, a few weeks ago, I blind tasted a Paul Roger 2002 versus a Paul Roger 2002 Sir Winston Churchill. I tasted blind. The Sir Winston Churchill was so much better than the regular Paul Roger. If you've ever tasted Vin Clerc, which is the wine before the second fermentation, it's incredibly acidic. I have no idea how master blenders can put those wines together to create the house style champagne every single vintage. Generally, vintage champagnes, even though they're released with a lot of age on them, need more time in the bottle to unfurl complexities, but the truth is in the glass and we're going to blind taste it. By the way, when I bag these up and cap them, I'm going to cap them with these little units. This is the Corvin sparkling system, just so you know what this is. I actually did a video comparing how well this works versus a fresh bottle of champagne. I'll also link that in the comments. If you watch this video, you pretty much know about champagne or you drink a lot of it. Champagne is made from a region in France. It can't be called champagne unless it's from Champagne in France. There are 7 varieties, although 3 are the most commonly used, and those are Pinot Noir, Meunier, which are red grapes, then Chardonnay. You'll also see in Champagne Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Petit Meslier, and Arbonne. Ironically, most of the champagne that's produced is white. However, over 2/3 of the plantings in Champagne are from red grapes, which seems kind of funny to a lot of people. There are rosé champagnes, but most champagnes are white. You just take the skins off those red grapes and the juice is clear, which means you'll end up with white wine. I've put off this video for a little while because champagne blind tastings are a little bit harder for me to manage, especially as a one-man show, but let's taste some champagne. Okay, I opened these up, I poured them out, I bagged them up, I topped them with my Corvin sparkling system because it's champagne and I want to save it for later. Had somebody mix them up for me, tasting out of these Schatzweisel glasses. I like these glasses because I've used them in different competitions recently at Monts Vinny. I like it because they're kind of universal glasses. They're small, they're affordable. I think a set of 6 is like 58 bucks and they're pretty durable. Also, it's great for tasting because it's not a huge glass. I have smaller pours, yet there's a bigger ratio of wine to glass versus in a bigger glass. I like them. I'll put a link in the description box if you want to check them out. Let's start out with set number 1. We'll start here on my right, your left. Let's see what's happening in the glass. Let's start with wine 1 here. Wine 1 has those bread and brioche notes that I absolutely love in champagne. Love to death. Brioche, some baked apple, some mineral slatey type notes, maybe even a little white flour. It's crystalline, it's clear. Let's check out wine number 2 here. Wine 2 has more dried fruit flavors. It's not as biscuity, not as toasty, not as explosive. Let's see how they are in the mouth here. Let's start with wine 1. Wine 1 is so impeccably balanced. It's got the fruit, the brioche notes, that baked bread type flavor, red apple skins, even some white peach. It's explosive. It's good. It's hard. Let's start. Let's go to wine 2 here. This is what's confusing. Wine 2 is not as explosive, but it has similar flavors to wine number 1. However, wine 2 has a little bit longer of a finish. Let me retaste these here. Oh. Wow. This is really close. I like the flavors in 1 a lot more. 2, though, has just a slightly longer finish, and this is really where it's hard to score. This is extremely difficult. When it comes to high quality wines, there's just like subtle nuances. That's why scoring, you don't take scores as gospel. They can change. Number 1 has some fresher fruit flavors, while number 2 has some more dried fruit flavors. So maybe 2 is the vintage sparkler because it has the length. Maybe it's the flavor and dried fruit flavors, although I think I prefer the hot popping freshness of wine 1. I'm gonna go, man, this is a big start. I'm gonna go 95, 93 plus. And for me, I don't care if the vintage sparkler wins or not. Let's go with wine 1. I like the fresh fruit flavors in this. Let's see here. So we have the Charles Heidsieck. This is the Millésime 2013 Brut Millésime, 57% Pinot Noir, 43% Chardonnay. This comes in at $120. Charles Heidsieck is one of my favorite Grand Marque producer that uses a lot of vintage champagne in the blends, more than any other producer. Like we're going to see right here, this is the normal Charles Heidsieck. Like I said, I gave it 93 plus points. This makes sense now because Charles Heidsieck uses like 50% of vintage older champagnes in the blend to make their Brut Reserve. This comes in at $60. This is Pinot Noir and Chardonnay with a little bit of Meunier. Again here, man, even though the vintage has some freshness to it, it was a little more explosive, I liked it more. Here's one instance where it's double the price. Is it double as good? That's not how wine works. People ask, oh, is it worth it? People buy wine for a lot of different reasons. Could be image, could be as a gift, or could be they want value for money, but they don't always. In this case, it's not multiple times better, but man, the Millésime is better. I gave it 95 compared to 93 plus points. Charles Heidsieck makes about 1 million bottles a year, which is small for a Grand Marque. And it seems like a lot of wine, but if you think of it, I think Moet's up near 25, 30 million. I think Veuve Clicquot's close to 18 million. So it's one of the smaller Grand Marque. Spectacular champagne. Let's move on. That was an awesome tasting to start. Okay, set 2. Wine number 1 here. Again, you see these topped with Corvin sparkling toppers because I do champagne. I want to drink it later. These days, where my palate is, I'm tasting a lot of wines from red, white, rosé, everything. But if I want to drink at home these days, it's mostly I want to drink Riesling or mostly I want to drink champagne. Let's go with wine number 1, set 2. Okay, wine number 1. This actually is not super toasty. It's fruity. It smells more like a white wine. This smells a little like Chardonnay, barrel fermented-esque. Got a little bit of wood. You got some white peaches. You got some pineapple. You get a little bit of toastiness, but not as much as the first Charles Heidsieck. Let's go to 2 here. 2, again, more dried fruit flavors in number 2. Get the wood a little bit more. This is gonna be very interesting. Let's start on, let's see what the palate looks like. Okay, on the palate, this definitely becomes champagne-y. Have all the brioche notes, that nice little bottle patina. It's good. Let's go with 2 here. 2, more dried fruit flavors. You got more like dried apricots, dried peaches. On the back end, there's a little bit longer of finish. I think this might be the better wine, the vintage champagne. But then again, here's the case. Not everybody likes champagne. Not everybody likes those matured flavors. Some people prefer the freshness, maybe of wine 1 here. Oh man, these are good. Oh, the length and concentration on number 2 is better, in my opinion. But these are both really good champagne. When I do these scores here, it's not gospel. It's used to attempt to make a hierarchy when I'm tasting wines. These are all excellent champagnes. I'm going to go 93, 94 here. So, and I think that this one is the non-vintage wine number 1. But we'll see here. Let's see. You ready? You ready? Here you go. 93 points. It is the rare Millésime 2013. This is $250. Like I said, this used to be considered the reserve for Piper Heidsieck, but now Piper Heidsieck makes their own vintage champagne. So this is kind of a separate brand, even though it's owned by the Piper Heidsieck family. This is not made every single vintage. This is Chardonnay Pinot Noir. Excellent champagne, delicate, bright, and incredibly fresh. So it's so funny. I thought the non-vintage was a little bit older, but then again, and better. I preferred it. I gave it 94 points, just a point better. And it doesn't surprise me. This champagne has showed really well in the past. And here's the thing. Vintage champagnes can be a little fresher, have fresher fruit, because it doesn't have as much old reserve wine blended into it. This is the Piper Heidsieck, the Brut champagne. This comes in at $50. I used to just be okay on this champagne, and then with my collector group, last year we did a vintage champagne tasting, and one of the ladies in the group doesn't have a deep cellar. She just went out and bought a Piper Heidsieck, and amongst all of us, it was the second best champagne in the group amongst some great champagnes. And look at it show out here. This is beautiful champagne, but man, the Piper Heidsieck, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. Both great champagnes, but wow, here. So in one set, I preferred the vintage. One set, I preferred the non-vintage. Let's go on to the final set here. Ooh, and that's a big difference. 5 times the difference. I mean, again, is it worth it? I've tasted the champagne with age. It's extraordinary. Again, vintage champagnes made in tiny quantities, more for collectors, more for people that have deep cellars. That's how it is. Let's go on to the third set. That last thing doesn't surprise me because the rare champagne is usually a pretty delicate champagne. Again, sue me if you want. It's just my palate preference, and that's the thing. You got to trust your own palate. Trust what you like, not what your wine friends say, not what the publications say. Taste a lot of wines, get confident in what you like, and then be open to exploring. Open your mind up a little bit. Let's go with set 3, wine number 1. This smells like bruised apple, and I know bruised apple isn't great, but this is in a good way, almost like a fresh apple cider type flavor. This has some dried apricot flavors, some clay type notes, a little bit of crushed yellow flower. Let's go with 2 here. Whoa, 2 is a little bit more explosive. You get some more toastiness for sure. Some dried, it's like, these are almost exactly the same, except this has a little bit more toastiness for this palate. I want those autolytic, I want those yeasty, those toasty, those baked bread flavors. That's just a preference of mine. Let's go with wine 1 here. Tastes like aged white wine. Wow, completely different style. The Piper Heidsieck and the rare are a little fresher. Incredible length here. Let's go with wine 2. Champagne is so complex. 2, remember I said it smelled toastier? 1 tastes toastier. These are small, subtle nuances here. Hold on. This is a completely different style than the previous we tasted. This is the closest out of the bunch here. I'm going to go, I think this is the non-vintage 94, and I think this is the vintage on the left. I'm going to go 94 plus. Really close. Good champagnes. Again, these are champagnes, if you like those more matured white wine flavors, the more dried fruit, this is what you're going to go for. You want freshness, go with the Piper. The Charles is kind of in between. Charles is nice because it has some of those aged notes, but it still maintains some of the fresh fruit flavors historically. Let's go with this. I know what the set words were beforehand. I know this is a grower champagne, so 94 points. I thought this was the non-vintage. Let's check it out. This is the Clerc Briant. This is the Vertus Premier Cru Le Mont Ferrès. Millésime 2018, so it's not even that old. Brut 0, 0 dosage. This comes in at $300. Le Clerc Briant is a grower historical property, although I think an American couple bought them in 2012. This is 100% Chardonnay, so it's a Blanc de Blanc barrel fermented. I've had older vintages of this in the past, and it was just killer. And it was. I gave it 94 points. And again here, man, I just preferred That's just my preference. I preferred the non-vintage. This is the Champagne Clerc Briant Reserve Brut. This comes in at 80 bucks. This is 40% Pinot Noir, 40% Meunier, 20% Chardonnay. The style was more like aged champagne, so it's ready to go. Here's the thing too, with vintage champagnes, they're usually meant to be aged. Like this is already tasting aged, number 2. We'll see, you know, how the wines end up with time in the bottle. If you're talking about every day, you don't have a cellar, save yourself some money a lot of times. Drink the non-vintage champagnes. If collecting is important to you, the vintage champagne is good. Like I said, they were subtle differences. That's the results. Maybe if we tasted these in 15, 20 years, it'd be a lot different. That was just my palate preference. Tell me, do you prefer non-vintage champagne? Do you prefer vintage champagne? What are your thoughts about wines when they get exponentially more pricey? Are they worth the money to you? I'd love to hear. Drop it in the comments below.